Okay, so picture this. You're just swimming along, minding your own business, and then suddenly a whole school of fish decides to follow you. Sounds like something straight out of Disney, right?
Mhm.
But what if I told you we're actually like on the verge of making that a reality, thanks to the world of these things called biomimetic robots?
It really is amazing how science is, it's blurring the lines between nature and technology. Like in this case, we're talking about robots that are designed to mimic the way real fish look and act. And the implications of that are huge. Like we could really understand animal behavior better and even protect the environment.
For sure, and that's what we're going to dive deep into today. Some really cool research from these guys, Maurizio Porfiri and Stefano Marras at NYU-Poly. They've been looking at how a robotic fish can actually change the way golden shiners behave. And for anyone who doesn't know, those little freshwater fish you see everywhere. So think of this like our little fishbowl to explore, the crazy world of biomimetic robots.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how we can use tech to understand nature without messing it up. Traditionally, if we wanted to study fish behavior, we would have to capture them, tag them, or put them in tanks, which can totally change how they act. But these robot fish let us watch them in their natural habitat, without stressing them out.
Okay, cool. So before we get to the experiment itself, let's back up for a sec. For those of us who haven't been, watching robot documentaries like me, what exactly is biomimetic robotics?
Basically, it's taking inspiration from nature to build better machines. It's like this nature has spent millions of years perfecting designs for movement communication and problem solving. So why not learn from the best,
Wow.
right?
So we're talking like those drones that flap their wings like hummingbirds
Well,
or those prosthetic legs that move like cheetahs?
yeah, exactly. But in this case, we're focused on robots that swim like fish. We're not talking about some clunky metal thing. These are like really lifelike robots that can copy the way real fish move and even how they talk to each other. This lets scientists basically join the school and observe how they behave up close without scaring them away.
It's like having a tiny Jacques Cousteau robot swimming with them. Okay, so let's get into the experiment. These researchers at NYU-Poly, they built this special water tunnel. It's kind of like a fish racetrack. And then they put this robot fish in with a school of golden shiners. So did the shiners just freak out?
Well, that's what's so interesting. The researchers noticed three main things. First, when the robot was just sitting there not moving, the shiners basically ignored it. It was like, whatever, just another rock in the water. The robot had to do something special to join their group.
So it wasn't enough to just look like a fish.
So what happened when the robot came to life? Things got really cool when the robot's tail started moving. Suddenly, it was like the coolest fish in the tank showed up. The shiners got all interested and curious, and then boom, they start following the robot.
Hold up. I need to process that for a sec. So these fish are basically getting tricked by a robot.
It seems that way. It shows how important movement is for fish to communicate. It's like the robot was speaking their language and it triggered this instinct to school and follow. But here's the even crazier part.
Okay, I'm hooked. Did the shiners ever figure out they were being fooled? Or did they just accept their new robot leader?
Over time, the researchers saw that the shiners weren't just following the robot, they were actually syncing up their movements with it. Turning when it turned, speeding up when it sped up, slowing down when it slowed down. It was almost like they became one big, happy robofish family.
Wow, seriously. Were the scientists shocked by how much the shiners reacted to this? Did it change what they thought about how smart fish are?
Absolutely. This level of synchronization means the robot wasn't just triggering a simple follow response. The shiners were showing a level of social smarts that we're only beginning to understand. It's like they were learning from the robot and changing their behavior to match it. They basically joined a new hybrid school.
Okay, now this is where my sci-fi brain kicks in. Are we talking about robotic mind control here? Do these fish lose all their free will and just become like mindless drones following their metal overlords?
It's not exactly mind control, but it does make you think about what animal intelligence is and how social behavior works. What are the fish actually responding to? Are they learning from the robot, or is it all instinct?
Yeah, it makes you wonder if we've totally underestimated how smart fish actually are. But before we go all Planet of the Robot Fish on this, let's bring it back down to Earth. What are the real-world implications of this? Why should people care about a robot swimming with real fish?
That's the coolest part of this research. It's not just a cool sci-fi idea, it has real uses. For starters, think about studying animal behavior. These robots are a totally new way to watch animals without bothering them. We can see how they interact their mating rituals, even how they migrate, all without using those old methods that mess up their natural behavior.
So no more chasing fish around with nets and cameras just to get a peek into their world.
Yes.
We can send in the robot spy. That's got to be nice for the fish.
Totally. And it's not just about fish. We're talking about a whole new way to study animals. Imagine robot birds to study flocking robot insects to explore ant colonies, even robot mammals to watch how predators and prey interact in the wild. There are so many possibilities.
Okay, I'm picturing a whole army of robot animals spying on the animal kingdom. But let's stick with our fish for now. What are some ways this tech could help us understand and protect fish?
One exciting thing is conservation. Imagine using these robot fish to keep an eye on coral reefs, track endangered species, or even guide fish away from dangerous areas like oil spills or those giant turbines in dams. We could even use them to see how climate change is affecting fish behavior and migration.
Wait, so we could use robots to save fish from environmental disasters? That's amazing.
It shows how we can use this tech to not just study nature, but to actively protect it. We're talking about robots as guardians of our oceans and rivers, helping us understand and fix the threats that aquatic ecosystems face.
Just like we're giving fish a voice in how we protect them. But I can't help but wonder, how do the fish themselves feel about all this? Are we like messing with their natural rhythms by putting these robots into their world?
That's a really important question, and it brings up this whole fascinating but complicated thing about how fish communicate. You see, fish, they talk to each other in ways we're just starting to figure out, like subtle changes in their body language, little flicks of their fins, even electrical signals. And for these robotic fish to work, they have to be able to speak that language well enough so the real fish accept them.
So it's not just about copying the movements these robots have to crack the code of how fish talk.
Hmm.
What have researchers found out about how this robo-fish lingo actually works?
It's kind of like a combination lock, and we're just trying to figure out the right numbers.
Mhm.
We know that what the robot looks like is super important, like its shape, size, and how it moves. But there's also evidence that fish use other senses too, like their lateral line system, which helps them feel vibrations and pressure changes in the water.
Mhm.
So future robots might need to use these senses too if they really want to blend in.
It's crazy to think about all those little signals happening underwater. A whole conversation we're just starting to listen in on. But let's get back to how we can use this stuff. We talked about conservation, but you mentioned earlier that this tech could totally change how we study fish behavior.
Oh yeah, definitely. Take schooling behavior, for example. It's like a classic case of collective intelligence where hundreds or even thousands of fish move together perfectly, like one giant organism. But why do they do that? How do they make decisions as a group? These are questions that have puzzled scientists forever.
Yeah, it's like trying to understand the hive mind of bees. So how can we use these robot fish to figure out this underwater ballet?
Well, if you put a robotic fish into a school, researchers can change things about it, like its size, speed, or even the patterns it swims in. Then they can watch how the real fish react and start to understand the rules that control their group decisions. It's like having a puppet master controlling one fish to see how the whole school follows along.
So we're not just watching anymore. We're actually doing experiments, using robots to ask questions and get answers from the fish themselves. That's pretty awesome. What other fish mysteries could we solve this way?
Well, think about how predators and prey interact. We know fish have some crazy good ways of not getting eaten. But how do they know when danger is coming? How do they plan their escape?
It's like a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, but underwater.
Exactly. And with robotic fish, we can create fake predator attacks. We can program the robot to act like a shark attacking or a barracuda ambushing its prey. This lets us see how prey fish react in real time and learn their survival secrets.
It's like giving the fish a virtual reality lesson in how to avoid getting eaten. But beyond just surviving, could these robots help us understand more complex things like how fish become the leader or choose their mates?
For sure, fish societies are way more complicated than we used to think. They have their own pecking order, their rivalries, even complex mating rituals. And by using a robot that copies specific behaviors like being aggressive or showing off to attract a mate, we can study how these things play out within the group. It's like having a robotic wingman to see how the real fish react.
Okay, I'm seriously impressed by all this. But with all this talk about changing fish behavior, I gotta ask, are there any ethical concerns here? Are we crossing a line by using robots to influence these animals in their own environment?
You're right, that's super important. Like with any powerful technology, we got to use biomimetic robotics in a responsible and ethical way. Researchers are really aware of the potential for things to go wrong.
So it's not just about the cool science, it's about making sure we're not hurting these fish in the process.
You got it. We need to be careful about messing up natural behaviors in ecosystems. One of the main ideas behind biomimetics is learning from nature without hurting it. The goal isn't to control or manipulate, but to understand and live alongside.
It's like we're being invited to join their underwater world, We need to be good guests.
That's a great way to put it. It's about using this tech to get a deeper understanding and appreciation for how amazing and complex fish behavior is, not to exploit or control it.
So it sounds like we need to be cautious, but the potential benefits are huge.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're at this turning point where tech is giving us this like crazy access to all the secrets of the ocean, but we got to make sure we use it right. What are some of the big challenges that researchers are trying to figure out as they keep developing this technology?
One of the toughest things is just how complex the underwater world is.
Yeah.
It's a hard place to work, you know?
Mm.
Think about it. You've got currents and pressure, and you can't see very far, and all these unexpected things that can happen. And it makes it really hard to build robots that can work well and safely in those conditions.
So it's not like sending a rover to Mars where it's just, empty and dusty. We're talking about a totally dynamic world that's always moving and changing. How are engineers dealing with those challenges? It's all about constantly coming up with new ideas and making things better. They're creating new materials that can handle the corrosive effects of salt water. They're designing super sophisticated propulsion systems that move like real fish. And they're using advanced sensors and AI algorithms so the robots can navigate tricky environments all on their own.
So these aren't just like remote-controlled toys. These robots are getting smarter and more independent all the time. It makes me wonder, what are some of the next big things we can expect to see in this field? Like what's coming up for biomimetic robots?
One really cool area is developing swarms of robots. Imagine sending out hundreds or even thousands of these little robots to map the ocean floor or track pollution levels in real time or even follow entire fish populations.
Wow, so instead of just one robot fish, we're talking about a whole underwater army. It sounds like something from a movie, but with a real purpose. What would be the advantage of using swarms instead of just one robot?
Think of it this way. One robot can only collect so much data and cover so much ground. But a swarm of robots can work together like a giant brain gathering information from a bunch of different places at the same time. It's like having thousands of little eyes and ears underwater, giving us a way better picture of what's going on.
So it's like crowdsourcing, but with robots.
Yeah.
That really opens up what we can learn and do. What are some other cool things you're seeing being developed?
Another area that's really pushing the limits is using soft robotics. Most robots are made of hard stuff like metal or plastic, but soft robotics uses flexible materials like silicone or rubber. This makes the robots more adaptable and less likely to damage their surroundings.
So instead of those clunky metal things, we're talking about robots that are more like, actual fish.
Yeah.
They're soft and bendy. What's so good about using these softer materials?
Well, first of all, it lets the robots move more naturally in the water, just like real fish do. That makes them more efficient and also less likely to scare away the fish they're trying to study.
It's like the difference between watching someone do the robot dance and watching a really good dancer. I can see how that would be way less scary for the fish. So what other benefits do these soft robots have?
They're also a lot tougher. If a regular robot bumps into something, it could break. But a soft robot can just bend and flex and bounce back from hitting things without getting damaged. This is super important underwater, where there's all kinds of obstacles and currents you can't always predict.
So they're less likely to break down or accidentally hurt delicate coral reefs or other sensitive environments. It sounds like soft robotics is a big step forward for biomimetic robots.
Yeah, it really is. And it opens up all these new ways we can use these robots to interact with the underwater world. Like, imagine a soft robot fish that can gently take water samples or sediment without disturbing anything, or a soft robotic arm that can carefully handle delicate sea creatures without hurting them.
It's like having a robot hand that's as gentle as a human touch. That's pretty incredible. So we've talked about the amazing potential of this technology, but what about the future? Where do you see biomimetic robotics going in the next, 10 or 20 years?
I think we're just at the beginning of what's possible. I think we're going to see robots that can not only move like fish, but also think like them. Robots that can learn from their surroundings and adapt to changes and even talk to real fish using complex signals.
So we're talking about robots that aren't just mimicking the body, they're mimicking the brain too. That just blows my mind.
I know, it's amazing. And it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for understanding and interacting with life underwater. Imagine robots that can help us figure out how dolphins talk or how whales navigate, or even the secrets of deep-sea creatures that we hardly know anything about.
It's like we're entering a whole new age of exploration, but this time we're sending robot ambassadors to represent us in the ocean.
Exactly. And I truly believe these robot ambassadors will help us learn more about, appreciate more, and connect more deeply with all the amazing life in our oceans.
Well, that's a great way to wrap up this deep dive. It's been an awesome journey into the world of biomimetic robots and how they could change the way we study, understand, and protect our oceans. A huge thank you to our expert for taking us on this fascinating journey and leaving us with such a sense of awe. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time for another exploration into the world of cutting-edge science and technology.